At Incheon Airport, hunters stood guard, blocking off the affected area. The dense mana leaking from the gate signaled imminent danger, and one observer assessed that a dungeon break was likely to occur soon. If the dungeon boss wasn't neutralized at that very location, the resulting chaos could devastate the airport. Under the Apostles' control, a hunter prepared to falsely report to the Hunters Association that the situation was under control. The Apostle, surrounded by a dark aura and crackling black lightning, remained silent and watchful. Moments later, the dungeon break erupted. Creations were beings forged solely to carry out the will of their creator. When the creator lamented boredom, they clashed with one another in endless battles. When the creator desired something, they delivered it by any means, for that was their sole purpose, existence in service to their God. One day, their creator, God, spoke of a fallen kin in another dimension and commanded them to claim dominion over a world without a master. Obeying the divine order, they rallied, taught countless believers, and launched a crusade. Yet, traversing dimensions required an unfathomable amount of energy, and the passage itself narrowed in proportion to one's power. Thus, the army of God spent eons within the dimensional rift, marching unrelenting toward their target. When they finally arrived, they were met not with an empty world, but with a great darkness, a boundless abyss. This darkness and each member of its legion held terrifying power. Worse still, should one of God's soldiers fall in battle, they would be corrupted by the darkness and turned against their kin. With every fallen warrior, the power of the abyss grew. The war spread beyond the world without a master and into other dimensions as God's army, overwhelmed and despairing, began to falter. Amid the ruin, the envoy TL proposed a bold plan. The darkness, now expelled from the world without a master, would struggle to return due to its vast mana. Unlike them, the inhabitants of the world were manaless, making them vulnerable. If the army could spread their faith there, they could eventually establish a sanctuary and even summon a miracle. Teal's strategy relied on the mist burns, the weakest of believers whose bodies were ignited with holy fire. Though frail, their fanatic devotion and explosive evangelism posed a serious threat to those without mana. The army agreed. TL divided his strength into 5 fragments. The weakest of them carried the mist burns and infiltrated the world without a master, evading the detection of the darkness. However, upon arrival, this first fragment encountered an unforeseen development. Humans had acquired mana. It was later understood that mana had emerged through an event known as the Cataclysm. The fragment waited and eventually merged with the second fragment, me. Such a fortunate turn amidst a cosmic war could not be coincidence. It must have been orchestrated. There could be no further deviation from the divine plan. Thus, it became imperative to understand the apex of human potential, those called hunters, beings who wield mana. It was necessary to study them and their capabilities in order to complete the mission as a fragment of Tael. Teal stood calmly in the airport as chaos unfolded around him. Civilians ran in panic, their faces twisted with fear as a massive beast broke through the walls. Screams filled the terminal as people shouted that a dungeon break had occurred and urged others to contact the Hunter Association. Amid the panic, Teal observed the situation with measured thought. A magic beast with high mana output had begun rampaging, an ideal scenario for a high-ranking hunter to appear. He hoped to evaluate the capabilities of an S-rank hunter if possible. Nearby, a hunter arrived, confused and alarmed, questioning why a dungeon break had occurred, despite the presence of a designated guild. Teal quickly recognized them as the hunters stationed at the airport, all of whom were users of star powder. Star powder, an amplifier, was crafted from the melted faith of the mist burns. Normally, the small fragments of belief they carried had no real effect. However, when subjected to Teal's power, amplify, their faith became a potent force. Perceiving one as a potential disruption, Teal dismissed them with a mental command. The hunter complied, acknowledging Teal as the apostle. A goblin drove its blade into the girl's back as she collapsed, reaching out and pleading for help. Teal watched in silence, unmoved by the scene before him. His thoughts drifted deeper. Creations, he believed, existed solely for their creator, God. Life itself, in his understanding, had meaning only through the fulfillment of divine will. Yet as he observed the girl, clinging to life with desperation and willpower, he began to question, why did humans possess desire? A trait reserved only for creators, not creations. Could it be that these fragile mortal beings were more than what they appeared? Could they, in some way, be higher beings than the creations forged to serve? The beast continued its relentless assault on the fleeing humans, tearing through everything in its path. Panic spread as people scattered in terror. Suho arrived at the chaotic scene, immediately realizing that a dungeon break had erupted the moment he set foot in the area. The man lay on the ground, paralyzed with fear, as the beast charged toward him. Just before the dark creature's attack could land, Suho intervened, striking the beast with his knee and positioning himself between it and the man, signaling for the frightened civilian to escape. Teal observed the scene as Suho swiftly kicked a goblin's head and slashed through the others with his dagger. A thought formed in Teal's mind. This hunter in a black mask might be the saboteur Lee Minsung had mentioned,